married the girl of my dreams, only to find out that my child is not mine, but my brother's. I always knew that my brother and I weren't the best of friends, but I never imagined that a simple fight over a girl would end up giving such a dramatic turn to our lives. It all started in college. She, Valeria, was an incredibly beautiful girl, with this light that seemed to shine in any room she entered. Both my brother and I met her at a social event, and although at first we seemed to agree that she was a special girl, we never imagined that she would take such an important role in our lives. As happens in these cases, things started to escalate quickly. My brother, always so impulsive and arrogant, began to show more interest in her, although he was not at all the type of guy who noticed this kind of thing. He had no problem trying to be the first to win her over, and he had always been the popular guy of the group. At first, I thought it was all a game, that it was something temporary, but I soon realized that I was not prepared for what that really meant. Valeria and I started talking to each other more, and although I wasn't looking for anything in particular, the chemistry between us became undeniable. Over the course of a few weeks, I grew closer to her, and to my surprise, it was reciprocated. My brother, of course, was not happy at all. The friction between us became more frequent, but I was determined to follow what I felt for her. The situation reached an unsustainable point, and one day, at a birthday party, my brother exploded. In front of everyone, he accused me of betraying him, of taking away something he had wanted from the beginning. I, of course, responded to him, and the fight was so strong that we ended up facing each other with shouts and pushes. The words coming out of his mouth were not only about Valeria, but about everything that had been built between us as siblings. At that moment, I felt that I was not only losing Valeria, but my own brother, and the truth is, I didn't know how to handle it. Despite everything, Valeria and I decided to move on. We knew that what we had built together was something real. My brother stopped talking to me, and even though I tried to get closer to him several times, he kept pushing me further away. Things between Valeria and me became more and more serious. A couple of months later, I proposed to her, and she accepted without thinking twice. Despite all the conflict, I felt like my life had found some peace. We got married, and even though the scars from that fight never disappeared, I was convinced that we had made the right decision. Life went on, and soon after, Valeria became pregnant. Those were months of uncertainty, excitement, but also a strange tension. When my son was born, I felt that everything I had been through had finally been worth it. Being a father was an indescribable feeling, but just when I thought my life had finally found a direction, the truth came out. One day, Valeria confessed something to me that took my breath away. There was something she hadn't told me before. She looked at me with a mix of guilt and fear, and after what seemed like hours of silence, she dropped the bomb on me. The child we have is not yours. At that moment, my world fell apart for me. Confusion and pain shot through me like I'd been hit with a sledgehammer. My son, the child I'd fought so hard for, the one I'd cared for, the one I'd loved, was not mine. He's your brother's, Valeria told me. It was hard for me to process it. It was hard for me to understand it, but it was the truth. She had been with him before our relationship began. During that ugly fight, she and my brother had a brief encounter. When I learned the truth, I felt betrayed by the two people I loved most in the world. My brother, the one who had always been my rival, but also my friend, the man who had not only lost my trust, but had now taken away the most important thing I had. And Valeria, the woman for whom I had let everything fall apart, the one who was now confessing her lie to me. I didn't know what to do or what to think. Everything I had believed up until that moment had crumbled in the blink of an eye. My whole life seemed like one big lie. My son wasn't mine, but I still loved him. I still saw him as my own son, and that left me even more confused. How was I going to be the father of a child who didn't share my blood? What would happen to my relationship with Valeria? And with my brother? Questions kept spinning in my head. I couldn't talk to anyone. I couldn't share my pain because I didn't even know where to start. The worst thing was that, despite everything that had happened, the love for my son never disappeared. Despite everything, I couldn't stop feeling responsible for him. I felt like my whole body had frozen in that instant. My mind was spinning, trying to understand how I had gotten into this situation. The person I loved the most, the woman I had married and planned a future with, had lied to me all this time. But the worst part wasn't that. The worst part was that everything I had done for that child, all the love and sacrifice I had given him, had been in vain. It didn't matter that I had given myself to be the best father I could. In the end, he wasn't mine. My first reaction was anger, an anger so deep that I couldn't even look at Valeria. She tried to get closer, but I pushed her away. Every word that came out of her mouth hurt me even more. "I'm sorry. I really don't know what happened to me. I made a mistake," she said through tears, but I couldn't hear her. The pain had consumed me completely. How could I forgive something like that? How could I trust her again? But deep inside, I knew I couldn't hate the boy. He wasn't to blame for anything. He was the victim in all of this. He looked at me with his innocent little eyes, not knowing what was happening. He needed me, and I couldn't let him down. For a few days, the house became a place of tension and silence. Valeria tried to talk to me on more than one occasion, but I shut down. My mind was so overwhelmed that I couldn't even think straight. Despite everything, I couldn't shake the feeling that I still wanted to be with my son, despite the truth I had just discovered. I couldn't hurt him, I couldn't walk away from him, but how was I going to continue living with everything that had happened? I knew my brother knew that he was aware of everything and that he had somehow played a role in it. I couldn't forgive him so easily. The days passed and I finally made a decision. I needed to face my brother. I knew I had to see him face to face, ask him everything I had been holding in all this time. It wasn't just for me, it was for my son. How could I live knowing that my brother had been with Valeria and that, in the end, the child was his? I needed answers, and I needed to let him know that I wasn't going to let all of this destroy me. The day I finally met him, my heart was pounding. I didn't know if I should yell at him, hit him, or just walk away and disappear from his life. When I got to his house, I saw him sitting on the couch, watching TV, as if nothing had happened. Without thinking, I walked up to him and said, "I need you to explain everything to me. I need to know why you did it. Why did you do it?" He looked up, and for a moment, I thought he was going to tell me something that would justify everything that had happened. But what he said left me even more broken. "I never meant for things to end like this, but what I feel for Valeria, you don't understand, brother. You never did. She was always the woman I wanted, and you didn't give me the chance to make her mine." Those words shattered me. My own brother, the one who had been by my side for so many years, was telling me that he didn't care about what I felt, that he only cared about what he wanted. But the worst thing of all was that, despite everything he had done, he didn't seem sorry. He looked at me with an indifference that made me feel more alone than ever. I realized that I wasn't going to get any apologies, that I wasn't going to get any answers that would give me peace. My brother had already gone his way, and although I couldn't change what had happened, I realized that I wasn't going to let it destroy my life. My son needed a father, and even though he wasn't my father by blood, I loved him with all my being. I had to move on, for him, for his future, for his happiness. I stood up from my chair and said to my brother, in a voice firmer than I felt, "I'm not going to forgive you, but that doesn't matter now. The only thing that matters is my son, and I'm going to do everything I can to give him the life he deserves. I don't need you in my life, and I never will." I left his house without looking back. I didn't know what the future held, but I was determined to move forward. It didn't matter what my brother had done or what Valeria had done anymore. What mattered was my son, and I was going to be the best father I could be to him, no matter what anyone thought. The next day, as I thought about everything that had happened, I realized that life had taught me a hard but necessary lesson. Even though things didn't go the way I expected, even though the love and loyalty of the people I loved most had failed me, I could still get through this. And my son would be my driving force. No one would take that away from me. No one would take away my chance to be the father I always wanted to be. The days after that confrontation with my brother were the hardest of my life. The tension in my house was unbearable. Valeria, even though she tried to reach out and show remorse, couldn't erase what had happened. Every time I saw her, a mix of sadness, anger, and confusion invaded my being. I wondered if I had ever been enough for her, if the love I gave her, the promises we built together, really meant anything. Because how could it be that she had lied to me for so long? How could it be that she had stayed silent, watching me fight for our family while she had secrets so big that they now broke me inside? Every time I looked at my son, my heart sank. I knew I loved him with everything I had, but the truth kept pounding in my chest like a heavy stone I couldn't shake off. He wasn't mine. Everything I had given for him, everything I had done for his well-being, had been a lie. And I couldn't help but wonder if this was all a way for life to mock me. I felt so helpless, like everything I had done, all the struggle, the sacrifice, had been for nothing. Valeria came closer to me, tried to talk, but I couldn't bear it. I felt trapped. I didn't know if I loved her anymore. I didn't know if I could forgive her anymore. Every time I looked at her, I saw the betrayal in her eyes, the complicity in her silence. But on the other hand, I also saw the child I had always believed was mine. He wasn't to blame for anything, and he needed me. That was the only thing that mattered. Couldn't let him down. The pressure of it all was getting to me. My mind kept spinning. I went out for a walk one night, searching for clarity, searching for answers in some corner of my soul. I didn't want to be at home. I didn't want to hear Valeria's words or the justifications my brother had given. I just needed to be alone, to find something inside me that would give me the strength to keep going. But the truth kept hitting my head hard. How was I going to go on if I couldn't trust anyone? If my own brother had betrayed me and my own wife had lied to me? I stood in the park, looking at the stars, searching for something to give me peace. It was then that I remembered what my father always told me. Strong men are not those who never fall, but those those who get up after they fall. Those words echoed in my mind like a beacon in the midst of darkness. No matter how much I was hurting, no matter how much the people I loved the most were tearing me down, I was going to keep going. Not for them, but for me, for my son. When I returned home, I found Valeria waiting for me in the living room. I knew I had to talk to her, but this time, something had changed inside me. I no longer felt so vulnerable, so weak. I could no longer be the man I had been before. I could no longer depend on the people who had failed me. "I've given you everything, Valeria," I said, my voice steady, though my heart still felt broken. "I gave you my love, my trust, my life, and you lied to me. You lied to me all this time, and now it's all come crashing down. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, but what I do know is that I'm not going to keep wasting time wondering why you did it. I'm not going to need you in my life the same way anymore. My son, he's the only thing that matters to me now. And if you're going to be in his life, you're going to have to prove that you actually care. Because honestly, I don't know. I don't know if I can trust you again." Valeria looked down, tears slowly falling down her face, but I no longer felt compassion. I had spent so much time trying to understand her, to justify her mistake, but I could no longer. There was nothing left of that woman I had loved. The damage was done, and nothing could change it now. Over the next few days, my relationship with Valeria began to crumble even further. Even though I tried to make things work, there was no turning back. I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. Something inside me had broken, and the worst thing of all was that, even though I tried, I couldn't fix it. My mind was filled with doubts and fears. What would happen if I stayed with her? Would I ever be able to forgive her, or had my love for her died forever? The worst part of it all was that I now felt more alone than ever. I had lost my brother, I had lost my wife's trust, and even though I had my son, I didn't know if I could live up to being the father he deserved. Would I be enough for him? Would I be able to be the man he needed? Day after day, I struggled with these thoughts, but something inside me told me I couldn't give up. My son needed me, and even though my life wouldn't be the same, I had to keep going. Couldn't let the pain consume me. I had to fight for him, for myself, for the family that, though broken, I could still save. But the question remained in my mind. Could I really move on after everything I had been through? The days grew longer, but the weight on my shoulders did not lessen. Valeria would not leave me alone. No matter how hard I tried to keep my distance, every time I saw her, I was tormented by the image of everything I had done. The love I had for her, what I had sacrificed, what I had believed was our life. But now it all seemed like a mirage. And the worst of all was that, although I swore to myself that I would not fall for her manipulation, sometimes I found myself at the crossroads of my own feelings, wondering if there was a part of me that still needed her, that still wanted to save what was left. One afternoon, as I watched my son play in the yard, I wondered if I would ever be able to trust anyone again. My son, though not mine by blood, had grown up under my roof, in my arm. Every laugh, every gesture, every moment I had shared with him felt so real, so deep, that it was impossible for me to think of him as something other than myself. And though the knowledge of the truth had shattered me, I still felt like I couldn't let go of him. What if I had given up? Where would he have been, with all that pain and confusion in his life, when his real father hadn't even had the courage to show his face? All of this became a constant tug of war inside me. I tried to move on with my life, but the truth got in the way of every step I took. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the man I had been before. Everything had transformed into an amalgam of mistrust, doubt, and resentment. Pain was in every corner of my life, and the fear of trusting anyone again paralyzed me. Valeria kept insisting that we needed to rebuild our relationship, that she was sorry for what she had done. But those words, although laden with tears, weren't enough. I couldn't just close my eyes and forget what had happened. The lie was too ingrained, too deep. But despite all this, something inside me kept telling me that I should stay. The guilt I felt for the child, the pressure of having to do everything right, kept me in that tense space between resentment and love. On more than one occasion, I found myself at night, sitting up in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering which path to take. My mind told me that I should cut it all off, that I should get away from Valeria and start over. But at the same time, I couldn't help but think about my son, about how he would see all this. I had already given him all my love, my support, my affection. How could I leave him now? The last time Valeria brought up the subject with me was on a rainy night. While we were having dinner, she tried to talk about our relationship again, about what we could do to save it. "I'm so sorry, really. I swear I don't know what came over me. I want us to be the way we were before. I want our family to be like we dreamed of," she told me, her voice breaking. But what she said next cut me off completely. I know I was wrong, but what hurts me the most is that you don't even give me the chance to show you that I'm the woman you deserve. How can we move forward if you're not even willing to try? That was what hurt me the most. It wasn't just the lie, it wasn't just the fact fact that the child wasn't mine. The worst of all was that she didn't understand that, even if she tried to ask for forgiveness, the damage had already been done. There was no going back. It wasn't about trying, it was about the fact that she had crossed a line that could no longer be undone. I didn't see her the same way anymore. I no longer felt that trust, that security that she once gave me. And although my words were harsh, although I told her that I needed time, that I couldn't forgive her immediately, deep down I knew that there was no time that could heal the wound she had left me. Weeks passed and something inside me began to break. I felt more distant from my son, even though I loved him deeply. I didn't want to project my pain onto him. I didn't want him to grow up with the image of a broken father, of a man incapable of healing. The situation ate away at me. Every time I looked at him, I saw the reflection of the guilt, of the love and sacrifice he had given, but I also saw the shadow of the truth, that shadow that followed me like a ghost, like a reminder of everything I had lost. Until one afternoon, while I was taking a walk to clear my head, I ran into my brother. We looked at each other, not knowing what to say. Our relationship was never the same after what had happened. There was no longer that closeness, that brotherhood we shared before. He had betrayed me in the cruelest way, and although I tried to rebuild my life, his presence only brought back painful memories. He came closer slowly, as if he expected me to speak first, but I couldn't. The words stuck in my throat. Finally, it was he who broke the silence. I know that what I did is unforgivable. I know that everything we built was destroyed because of me, he said in a low voice. I'm sorry, brother.
I'm truly sorry.
I looked into his eyes, but I didn't feel even a bit of anger. The anger had been drained away over time, leaving only a gaping emptiness. I don't know what to feel anymore, I replied. You broke everything, not just with her, but with us. But the worst part of all, brother, is that I don't regret loving my son, even though he's not mine. I don't regret giving him everything I gave him because he needs me and I need him. What tears me apart is knowing that all of this, everything that's happened, should never have happened. He lowered his head as if his own words had hurt him, and it was at that moment that I understood that what I needed was to heal myself. I couldn't keep holding on to what no longer existed. My brother had made a decision that had destroyed so many lives, and although I couldn't change what he had done, I could change my future. I could be the father my son needed. Yet the question kept echoing in my mind. What would happen now? How to move forward after all this? How to find peace when everything you once believed in fell apart in the blink of an eye? I felt something inside me break as I realized I could never get back what once was. The remaining pieces of my life no longer fit together, no matter how hard I tried. I looked at my son every day, trying to find a reason to move on from everything that had happened, but the truth was that neither he nor I were whole. There was something broken, a rift that was impossible to heal. As the days passed, Valeria, my wife, tried to get closer, but something in my heart no longer recognized her. She tried to show me affection, to talk about plans for the future, but in my mind, only the image of my brother resonated, the face of betrayal that I could never erase. In every conversation, in every gesture, I saw the memory of what had been and what could no longer be. How could we heal after all this? How could I trust someone who had destroyed my life and that of my son with such ease? There were times when I felt like I couldn't bear it anymore, that all the pain, all the frustration would consume me. I would wake up every morning, watching my son sleep, and I would think about how difficult it would be to explain the truth to him one day. How would I talk to him about his real father? How would I tell him what had happened if everything I had experienced with him was an imposed love, a love with a weight that didn't belong to it? I wanted to protect him, but as time went by, I wondered if the lie would mark him, if one day he would come to understand the sacrifice I had made for him. Sometimes, even during the day, when I saw Valeria smiling at me with that expression of regret, I felt the resentment I had accumulated take over me. It was as if everything I did, everything I tried to rebuild, was just one lie after another. The life we had tried to create together had been built on a fragile foundation, on a deception that no one wanted to face. And then, one day, something changed. Valeria stopped trying to get closer, stopped making promises about the future. It seemed like she had finally understood that she couldn't keep pretending. On her face, I saw something I hadn't seen before, a resignation, as if she was losing hope too. The love I had been trying to rebuild vanished before my eyes, and the worst thing of all was that I didn't even regret it. I no longer felt that need to hold on to what was already gone. But the most painful thing thing was when she confessed to me that, even though she knew what she had done was wrong, she still had feelings for my brother. Those words destroyed me completely. I felt small, insignificant, as if everything I had given, everything I had sacrificed for her, had not been worth it. At that moment, I understood that I could not continue to carry that weight. I needed to free myself from everything, not from my son, not from my love for him, but from the lie that had accompanied me for so long. The worst of all was the disbelief I felt when I realized that, despite everything that had happened, my brother was still in the back of my mind. I felt a strange mix of anger, disappointment, and sadness. How could a man be capable of destroying everything he had built for something as insignificant as love for a woman who, in the end, did not love him? The cycle of betrayal, of deceit, had pushed me to the edge. I had thought that once everything was revealed, everything would be over. But the truth was that nothing had been resolved. As the months passed, my life became somewhat of a routine. I no longer cared about rebuilding my relationship with Valeria or what was happening with my brother. All I cared about was my son. He was my reason to keep going, my reason to breathe, to get up every day. Even though his existence had been a constant reminder of the pain the lie had caused me, the love I felt for him never disappeared. One day, as I watched him play with his friends, I realized something. The relationship I had with him didn't need to be perfect. It didn't need to be a carbon copy of what I had dreamed of. All that really mattered was that, despite everything that had happened, he had given me the chance to be his father. And even though the road had been difficult, even though the truth had broken me, all I could do now was be the best father I could be to him. I didn't care that I wasn't his biological father. All I knew was that, to him, I was his father, and that somehow gave me peace. The nights became quieter. The arguments with Valeria became less frequent, and little by little, I learned to accept that life doesn't always unfold the way one plans it. I had lost many people along the way, but most importantly, I had found a reason to move on. I no longer needed my brother's forgiveness or Valeria's acceptance. All I wanted was to move on for my son, for the boy who had given me the chance to be more than just a broken man. Sometimes I find myself thinking about how life came to me, about everything that has changed, about the choices I made. And, although the pain of betrayal is still there, it no longer consumes me. I have learned to handle it, to live with it, because what truly matters is what I build now. My son. He is the future I decided to create. As I watched my son play, his laughter full of innocence, I realized something I had never understood before. Everything I had been through, all the pain and tears, had been worth it just for him. It didn't matter how he had come into my life or all I had had to endure to be his father. What mattered was that I had been there for him when he needed it most. I was the one who had held him in my arms, who had picked him up when he fell, who had loved him unconditionally. The sun was beginning to set, turning the sky into shades of gold and orange, and it was at that moment, looking at my son, that I felt a deep peace. It no longer mattered what had happened with Valeria or my brother. I no longer cared what the world thought of me. All that mattered was my son's future, and I would be the man to accompany him every step of the way. I didn't need anyone's recognition. I didn't need anything more than his smile, his unconditional love, which told me more than 1,000 words. That's when my son, without warning, came up to me and hugged me tightly. It wasn't just any hug. It was a hug of pure love, of trust, of gratitude. And in that moment I knew, without a doubt, that I had done the right thing by moving forward, by being his father, by choosing him over all adversity. I looked into his eyes, and in his gaze I saw everything I needed to see. The future, hope, love. No matter what fate had in store for me, what matters is that through it all, I kept the most important thing, him. And so, with that certainty in my heart, I knew that there was no greater victory than being his father. My son didn't need to know the story behind it all. He didn't need to know about the pain, the lies, the betrayal. He only needed to know that his father loved him, and that love was more than enough to heal any wound, to leave behind what was no longer reparable, and to build together a future full of hope without any more resentment or shadows. So as I watched my son walk away, running into the sunset with a bright smile, I knew that the true meaning of my life was not what I had lost, but what I had found. And even though the road was long and painful, I would never regret anything, because my son was the reason it had all been worth it.